I can't record, Brett. I'm not co-host.
No problem. Hello, everybody. Welcome. We get started here in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Capital Gains Tax Solutions Mastermind, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy. Using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is an amazing way for you to exit with maximum flexibility options and to have the ability to grow your wealth, preserve the capital gains tax, and make an impact with your wealth for your family or for causes that you believe in most. We are so grateful to have you either watching this live stream on YouTube or on Facebook, or if you're catching us on a replay as well. Thank you so much for checking it out. Please share it with someone if it's inspiring for you. Also, like it as well if it's helping you out. And for those who don't know me, my name is Brett Swartz. I'm founder of Capital Gains Tax Solutions. And we're on a mission to help you either equip your clients to exit well, and or if you are the potential high net worth individual selling a multi-million-dollar asset, wanting to defer capital gains taxes, you're in the right place. In today's kind of live stream here, we're going to be talking about the Deferred Sales Trust and flexibility when exiting million-dollar assets. And that's really the key here. If you've built wealth over a period of time, if you've built a business, you've owned a primary home, investment real estate, stocks, cryptocurrency, the biggest thing we have found with those that are exiting highly appreciated assets is they want an effective capital gains tax exit plan, which means what? Maximum flexibility with their time, flexibility with their investments, and flexibility with the payments that come back to them over time as well. And also flexibility with paying the tax as it comes back. And so that's what we're here to talk about. Because guess what? The government has a spending problem. If you haven't caught on yet, over close to, I think, 32 trillion, maybe we're over that mark at this point, which means we all have a tax problem unless we have a tax strategy and a team to execute a business plan that makes sure that this money that we have stays working hard for us. In fact, if you've ever seen that show, it's Colin Cowherd. It's called The Herd. He's a sports, I guess, analyst or commentator. And he starts out with different analogies. And I want to, in the spirit of Colin Cowherd, I want you to think about the Deferred Sales Trust as it pertains to flexibility, sort of like a football game or a sporting, team that you're in. And in fact, you've worked long and hard to train and or to practice your investing or your work, like a football player might, and be able to make adjustments at the line of scrimmage. And as you're going for that touchdown, guess what? Someone is tackling you before you score that touchdown at the end of your sale. And that's the IRS. And they're like the big, let's see, what's the biggest defense right now? The 49ers, right? They have like the top defense in the entire NFL. And they're trying to stop you from scoring that touchdown. And sort of that's what the IRS is doing, or at least they want you to kick the field goal, right? They don't want you to score the full touchdown, perhaps. I'm kind of making them like they don't. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Who knows? They might be agnostic. But the point is, if you don't have a plan, you might just be kicking a field goal, getting 3 points, which is what? About maybe 60 or 70% of the net proceeds is what you're going to net if you have to pay, 30 or 40% of tax. And so the key here is to have some protection. And where does that protection come in a football game? We have that offensive line. That offensive line protects from the defense from tackling you right before you cross that finish line. And that's the key. And that's what the Deferred Sales Trust is, like that offensive line. It can protect you and or provide a barrier between you and the IRS to have to pay the tax by being able to hold them off. Now, can they hold them off forever? No, because this is not tax avoidance. This is tax deferral. However, you can still score that touchdown and achieve the outcome that you want by moving all of the funds into this trust, having an extra 30, 40, sometimes 50 or 60% of your net proceeds in the trust. And then you get to live off the interest and slowly pay tax over time. And so the Deferred Sales Trust provides you the opportunity to defer the tax, grow your wealth. As well, it has some flexibility with investments. The investments, good quarterback, you have to be able to call an audible. You don't want to have to be stuck, like say in a 1031 exchange, to have to pay or buy something that you don't really want to buy because the tax tail is wagging the investment dog, and the interest rates have jumped, and it's harder to get debt, and sellers aren't necessarily willing to accept lower prices at this point. So you might feel trapped in that 1031 exchange right now, and you want to be able to call an audible, but the game clock is running out. The play clock is running out, and you end up forcing yourself into a bad position. The worst case would be you throw an interception because you buy a bad deal, you get a deal that has bad debt, and now all of a sudden you're running an uphill battle. Rather than using the deferred sales trust, gives you that chance to call a timeout. You can call a timeout, and that the funds can sit in a diversified investment grade portfolio, typically a place like TD Ameritrade, Charles Schwab, where you can put it into conservative investments that are hedged and protected until an opportunity arises. So it's kind of like being able to call that timeout. But these timeouts, what's unique about it is it doesn't have to be a 30-second timeout or a 45-day timeout or 181. In fact, it can be in liquid investments for as long as you would like them to be, until an opportune time, an opportunity comes up. And when that opportunity comes up, guess what? You can strike, you can maybe hopefully score another touchdown. Maybe you can go for 2 now, right? Because things are going so well. And when is that? That's when it's a buyer's market. Now realize in 2008, it took about 3 years for the real estate market to bottom out. The stock market might have crashed, right? 07, 08, and it was a disaster. And real estate obviously was getting hit as well. But the actual commercial real estate marketplace, even the residential, it's kind of like a Titanic ship. It doesn't move as quickly as liquid investments for a number of reasons. But it turns, and it takes a while to turn. But when it turns, and it turns for a long time. And that took 3 years for the bottom to actually hit. And so the question is your strategy that you're going to use flexible enough to give you the time to invest when it makes sense for you? If you want to learn more about this, of course, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. I'm going to bring in some of the best strategic alliances and financial professionals that we work with, including the Jake Miller. And Jake Miller, how are you doing today? The name is a little different, but on the screen. But let's just start talking here.
Very good. Yeah, so happy to be here. And my executive assistant was actually using the computer prior to me, so I am now Maria Fernanda. Fantastic. But anyway, I'm not quite as good looking as she is, but here I am doing the best I can with the financial knowledge and wherewithal from being a coach of coaches for both CPAs and financial advisors and M&A attorneys across the country. What does that mean, Brett? That just means that we see some of the unique and atypical investments as well as tax strategies that people are trying to incorporate so that they don't have to necessarily have this profit share arrangement with the IRS immediately when they have some of these biggest transactions that they might incur during their life.
Absolutely. And Jake Miller, you're sort of like to me, Jake Miller, maybe like the offensive coordinator is one way to think about it, although he's a certified financial planner. He served in the military. He's an entrepreneur. He knows real estate really well. He's I think at least bilingual, maybe 3 languages. He's one of the most interesting, men in the world that I know. But Jake, when you think about flexibility as it pertains to the deferred sales trust, like how important is that in times like this?
It's incredibly important because timing is everything, Brett. It might be a fantastic time to sell, but it might not be a fantastic time to pay taxes. Or it might not be a fantastic time to reinvest with the proceeds of that sale. So a lot of clients out there hesitate and they don't pull the trigger when it is a good time to sell because of their biggest obstacle in overcoming the decision of do I sell, do I not, which is usually taxes. Now, not just taxes, but where do I put the money? Where else can I get that great return? We had a mutual client, Brett, in California, who was getting $600,000 a year income from his business, and he could sell it now for 2.4. But one of the questions he asked is, well, what would I put it into, right? And so our job is to bring options to the table based on the risk tolerance of a lot of people who just want to sell off into the sunset and retire, what have you, safe, secure, steady, consistent, reliable, sometimes even guaranteed, what have you. But then others are entrepreneurial. They might still be in their 20s or 30s or 40s or whatever. But what I'm saying is they might still have time on their side. So they're looking for that next business opportunity as well. And what financial tool is better suited to be the silent money partner than the deferred sales trust in the next business venture? So there's a lot of different things that the deferred sales trust can assist them with, because first and foremost, it gives them back the power of timing.
Very well said. And that's really the key here that we want to encourage everybody to be reminded of and or to learn for the first time, that time is the one thing that is an investment standpoint, that is the most important aspect of what you're doing. And it could be time for your horizon for how long the investment can go for. It could be, the cash flow that gives you back your time, right? Rich Dad Poor Dad, the whole idea is to create enough passive income to free you of your time, right? So you don't have to trade your time for dollars, right, to live on. Your dollars go to work for you, and as they come back in, that gives you back the time, because you don't have to do the active work for it. And you can grow commerce. You can do all the things that you're going to do. You can give more, make a bigger impact. So the deferred sales trust is that centerpiece, that capstone, or that thing that keeps you flexible as it pertains to timing. And we're in this transition with real estate. The stock market's been, maybe already transitioned or still transitioning. A lot of changes. We have the election coming up, and a lot of people want the ability to be flexible, because guess what? Time is the one thing we can't get back, and you want to be able to score that touchdown, whatever that means to you. Whatever that means for you personally, whether that's location freedom, time freedom, 1031 freedom, estate tax freedom. In fact, there was a deal working on this week alone with an amazing, big, huge Delaware statutory trust operator. By the way, the deferred sales trust is not a Delaware statutory trust. We do use Delaware statutory trusts, and we can help everyone with those as well. But those have some limitations. In particular, they only maintain a stepped up basis. They don't remove funds outside of the taxable estate. And this is one of the best in the whole country. We're going through this very large transaction, and we're looking at two options for the client. And we're talking about it. And what's interesting is he even got confused, thinking that the stepped up basis was the end all be all. And I had to kind of either remind him or educate him. I'm not sure what exactly he knew, but I said, hey, you realize that the stepped up basis is only capital gains tax. It's not estate tax. Estate tax is a 40%. Jake Miller says it well, the government's biggest mousetrap upon death. And so the question is, what strategy is going to solve what freedom and what kind of impact to have with the wealth? And it's either inside the taxable estate or outside the 1031 exchange or the Delaware statutory trust. It only does, it does some, definitely capital gains tax deferral, and definitely it does stepped up basis, at least as it stands right now. But it doesn't give you that flexibility with timing, and it doesn't eliminate the estate tax. And so the key is have a clear understanding of what the challenge is, where you're at, what your current circumstance is, and B, where you're going. And then couple that with the strategy that's going to give you the maximum amount of flexibility for your time to invest, time to live, time to be an entrepreneur, time to just sit in a calm ocean to wait until all the sharks feed. I have a good client. His name's Dave Levinson. In fact, he did a deal with us out in Georgia. Let me see if I can find it here in the pictures. It was a $7.5 million exit. He had about 4.6 million of debt, 7.7, or he had about 4.6 or so. Anyway, so he had a ton of debt. And he was in COVID. It was COVID. Everything was going crazy. He's done hundreds of transactions. He's going, Brett, I don't want to do another 1031 exchange. I want some debt freedom, right? I don't want to have to chase debt all over again. And if you think about it, had he done a 1031 a couple of years ago, what's happening right now is a lot of the fixed rate debts that were 3 or 5 years or 2 years interest only fixed, and then it adjusted and if they didn't have rate caps, these interest rates are doubling, and people are starting to lose their properties. And these properties, by the way, are 99% occupied. The rents have actually gone up the last few years. Operationally, they're doing great. I mean, they might have more insurance costs with what's going on with some of the natural disasters, but operationally, it's great. What's the problem is, what was a good deal because they had good debt has now become a bad deal because the debt has gone bad and or it's just gone high, right? So there's really no cash flow. There's all of these capital calls. And so this is a great understanding of the deferred sales trust for timing. He says, Brett, the deferred sales trust was created for times like this. He tells this entire story. And if you think about it, and it'd be great to do a full-time case study with what he does with the money to see where he ends up. The deferred sales trust, he has no debt. He's diversified. He has some liquidity, right? And he's not having to be, facing potential, foreclosure or having to have a big capital call because he put time on his side. He used the offensive line to give him more time. He scored the touchdown on the sale. He deferred the tax, and now he can redeploy to create more wealth. That being said, I want to bring in Jake Carpenter to see what his thoughts are on any of this analogy of football. I know Jake he might be a Seattle Seahawks fan. Don't hold against him, but Niner fans aren't big with that kind of thing. But Jake, what do you have to say for yourself on that?
Yeah, I mean, the deferred sales trust has been a game changer for a lot of my clients. And it's interesting how many people haven't heard of it, but if what you're doing currently works and has worked, then why change your strategy? But the problem is most of the investors are getting into an age and stage of life where they've gathered a variety of different assets, and those are businesses, it's real estate portfolios, it's stocks, it is Bitcoin, and they're ready to go from a actively grinding, building, growing position to a more passive position. And again, like Jake Miller said, because Jake and I work together quite a bit, is, where do you go to exchange a business that's providing so much income? What investment do you go into? Especially if it's passive, right? Because if it's passive, I'm obviously going to get a lower rate of return because there's no sweat equity involved. So that's where we come in as a team. And, Jake Miller might be the offensive coordinator, where I would come in as I'm like the quarterback, right? So Jake and I are working together, and we're running this offense to make sure that it's going to do what it needs to do for you to produce that passive income. You can still be active through the deferred sales trust, but a lot of my clients, they want to dial back on how active they are and maybe sell off some of their real estate portfolio. They want to sell the business, but keep the real estate the business is located in. And they want to just dial it back slowly over time so that they're comfortable with how much activity they have and how much trash, toilets, and liability they have to deal with. But that's the beauty of this, is it helps you control in an environment where if it's good to sell, it may not always be good to buy, right? So a 1031 exchange could be an inappropriate type of strategy to use, whereas the deferred sales trust, in many cases, especially like with one of our last clients, Brett, he just wants to hit pause for 5 or 10 years and just sit back and decide what he wants to do and gather his thoughts. This is a perfect tool to be able to hit pause, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's individual stocks, whether it's businesses, whether it's real estate portfolio, decide how active and or passive that you would like to be.
Amazing. Now you can learn more about Jake Carpenter by going to carpentercapital.llc or Carpenter. I'll let him say it. Jake, where can they find you if they want to find you?
Yeah, carpentercapital.llc. You can call the office at 509-396-5292.
Amazing. Jake Miller is at strategictaxsolutions.com, strategictaxsolutions.com, and I'm at capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. We all work as a team to help serve and help our clients create and preserve more wealth and or exit highly appreciated assets. Yeah, that's the topic of today. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. I want to open up for questions now. You can put questions into the chat. You can also unmute yourself and say hello to us. We love everyone to participate. So we do have, I see Keith. I think Keith, I've seen Keith before, maybe. Keith, hello. You want to unmute yourself and say hello?
Enjoying the presentation, and sounds really intriguing.
Absolutely. And can you tell us a little more about yourself? Are you selling something potentially, or do you help clients sell other things, or where are you calling from?
Yeah, so I'm a CPA. I'm in Oklahoma. I do business profitability and growth advising. So I'm spending a lot of time with like contract CFO and helping clients to grow their business, be more profitable, and contract CFO type things, and as well as tax planning.
Fantastic. What would you say is the biggest frustration when it comes to your clients that are exiting as it pertains to the flexibility with tax deferral strategies that you maybe have known about in the past?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just being familiar with and knowing the best option for that particular client.
And what would you say that particular client, I mean, when I say that, I mean, in general, what are they most looking for? What's the one thing that you felt like in the tax deferral strategy would make the biggest difference or impact for them if they could have it?
It's the tax deferral, or if there's ways to really, I would say, structuring what's best for the seller as well as the buyer, because the seller, these are competing interests here. And if you're on the selling side, you want to have the best situation for you. And so for me, it's knowing the facts, watching out for the pitfalls of one tax strategy versus the other. That's kind of.
I think that's really well said. And what would you say is the biggest pitfalls you've seen in your career as it pertains to tax strategies in general that you tend to be very cautious about?
Well, like I was visiting with a guy earlier today, and they had a situation where initially the seller was wanting, these guys would be the buyer. And so the seller was wanting to structure it in one way, and then some other people got involved, and all of a sudden the tax situation is much less advantageous in the proposal to the buyer. And so knowing the pitfalls of that and understanding that and how they should negotiate in that situation, does that make it a walk away? Is that something where we need to push back and say, no, let's do this differently? That kind of thing.
It sounds like the difference between goodwill and what's going to be like maybe equipment or something that they can purchase where they can depreciate from the buyer's perspective, it's more advantageous versus what's going to be what percentage is to goodwill, which could be advantageous for the taxes. Is that a fair summary what you're referring to, Keith?
Well, it could be, and I haven't even got that far with them yet. So I mean, it could be. We weren't able to get as far as why they proposed that change, and but anyway, so.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I'd be curious to see if you come back and report to us or just share with us. We're always digging in and geeking out about different ways to structure and such. So what I've seen in the past, what's unique about the deferred sales trust, we have a DST 1.0 and a 2.0, Keith. 1.0 is basically what we've been talking about here now. It's a traditional installment sale. It pays typically interest-only payments, although we can structure interest and principal. Most clients, let's say if they send a $10 million asset, and they defer, let's say 35% is an extra 3.5 million if they had a zero basis. And let's say the interest rate was written at an 8% note, it'd pay about $800,000 a year net of recurring fees is the goal. Okay. Now, if they did a DST plus, and by the way, that would be able to defer the goodwill, typically very simple there, but the equipment side of things can be a challenge, right? Depending on what kind of, depreciation they've taken. However, a DST 2.0, as long as there's not what's called a debt over basis issue, that can get it out and help there as well, and typically work for goodwill and the equipment, which is interesting part of this. So I'm just curious on that sale that you're looking at, is it one of the larger ones, like above 20 million, or is it kind of like below 5?
This is interesting. I have if we're going to talk nuts and bolts, I have a different one that I know more about that would be more fun to talk
We'll
about.
try that one. Yeah.
But it's still maybe applicable for the deferred sales trust. So
yeah, let's talk about that. That sounds great. Yeah.
So and I don't want to capitalize your time if you've got other people too.
No, it's great.
Okay, so let me think about this. The seller would be selling for, or the offer that's been presented to the seller is a 60% interest on a valuation that they came up with $6 million. So they want to pay $3.6 million for a 60% interest. However, they also want the company's pretty debt heavy, and they want the seller to pay off debt of say 2.3 million. So you've got basically 3.6 million that they're offering for the 60% interest based on a $6 million valuation. And then they're going to pay off 2.3. The seller would have to pay off 2.3 in in debt. So then you've got the remaining 1.3, and that would be the issue as far as, what to do with that and what the capital gains would be on that and how to structure it, at all. Think about the structure. The proposed.
Yeah. Yeah, just two questions real fast. You know what the adjusted basis is? Is it zero, Keith?
Okay, their basis is potentially negative. The company's pretty debt heavy. They have deferred losses, suspended losses, I think is how they're classified. Pretty significant. It's three different companies that all do the same thing, and they're only different companies because they're different states, but it's all one consolidated ownership. So the basis, only one of the three companies has any kind of positive basis, and the other ones, like if you look at the balance sheet, it's the liabilities exceed the assets, and there's negative equity is the difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Do you know if it's an S corp or a C corp?
It is an S corp. All three of the companies are S corps.
Do they have any partners?
Actually, let me take that back. One of the companies was just started like over a year ago, and so it may not have the S corp designation.
Okay, could be an LLC, just straight up. Who's the debt owed to? Is it owed to a bank?
Okay. A big piece of the debt is one of the EIDL loans, and the rest of it is, which they're potentially not going to pay that back because it's at a lower interest rate, and the thought is, well, maybe they won't pay that off. But the rest of it would be to the bank, and it's for mainly the equipment, like vehicles, work vehicles.
Interesting. Is it in Oklahoma, or where is it located?
Oklahoma, Arkansas,
Okay.
Texas.
I think, okay, so 25 to 30% there. Yeah, that's an interesting one because of that debt piece. If they're forced to pay off that debt at closing, so they have a couple things. They have a debt over basis issue, right? Let's imagine that the basis is zero. And if they're paying 2.3 million of debt, either at closing, right, from the proceeds, they're looking at ordinary income tax on that 2.3. So, and then on top of that, they still have, capital gains tax on all of it or some of it, right? So there,
Yes.
it almost sounds like it's a not an earn out, but like they're saving them, right? They're coming in to save the day here, and they're like, hey, we'll infuse capital, but we got to clean up the balance sheet, and we want 60% ownership for this much money. But they're in that seller seems like he's in a tough spot.
Yes, for
Okay.
sure. Well, and interestingly enough, I mean, here's another little dynamic in it. I said there's the suspended losses. The purchaser, who's very knowledgeable, he knows what he's doing in the industry, and he will be able. He has the resources that he'll be able to help, with a turnaround. The seller has had multiple years of losses, but the buyer is willing to still, pay positive amounts for it just based on the potential turnaround.
This is a fascinating one. I can't say I've heard one like this before because of that forced debt pay down, and then it's a good sized deal. That sounds interesting. I mean, we're happy to set up a time to work with you and them. We do, by the way, we work at no cost, no obligation. We'll work through these scenarios with the tax attorney, who's one of our business partners, and just go through it and just see what the options are. That's part of why we're different too. Although we've been talking heavy about the deferred sales trust because that is our niche focus.
Right.
and typically our go-to, but there's other strategies and other things that are out there. And we try to just weigh the options and sometimes it's a mixture of a couple different ways. But since this is a business sale, it doesn't qualify for a 1031 unless he's selling some kind of
There's
real
no real
estate
estate.
here. There's no real estate involved,
Equipment.
just equipment and a business. And so that, yeah, this one's going to be interesting because of the debt piece. That is, unless he could pay the debt off outside of this, which doesn't sound like he probably could. This is why he's probably doing the deal. It's going to be a heavy tax bill because one of the Achilles heel for the deferred sales trust, and I think really any tax deferral strategy, is it cannot defer debt over basis. Debt over basis is essentially did a cash out refi at a certain point or leveraged against the business years ago, and it was tax free at the time. And everyone's giving high fives. But when you go to sell it, the government says you've already received all that income. It wasn't taxed yet. So we're going to go ahead and just tax that ordinary income tax, not even capital gains tax rates, even higher rates. But it's on paper. Like, I mean, you get the closing, you pay off the debt, and you're like, well, how do I pay the tax? And it becomes this conundrum. Like, how do it's a Rubik's Cube that keeps getting more confusing. And so they're in a very difficult situation. I've seen entire deals blow up because they go, at the end of the day, I'm going to walk away with nothing. But maybe that's the scenario here. He already understands that. But the point is, we do have a solution for that if he was selling real estate, by the way. And it's called a Delaware statutory trust. But we do a particular Delaware zero coupon, which is a deal that has a high debt replacement that you can 1031 Delaware 1031 into and replace that debt over basis. And we do that with investment real estate. That's why I asked Keith if it happened to be any real estate involved. There's not. So they're kind of in a pickle, Keith. This will be an interesting one. Any thoughts on what I just said there?
I agree they're in a pickle. And because of the debt, it limits the potential upside that they could even come out with on this. Now, the other potential upside is even if this portion of the transaction is not as profitable as would be preferable because of the tax implications right now, the seller is going to continue to be a 40% owner, as well as part of the operations of the organization, and so they potentially can have the earnings in the future. So if the assistance of the purchaser is able to really prove effective in the turnaround, then the seller is going to be able to benefit from future earnings on that.
Good.
So
yeah,
it's extremely, I mean, the near term, it's extremely important that the tax be minimized and the deal be structured in such a way that it minimizes the tax impact to the seller right now or in the future. But they're also that wouldn't, if that's not favorable, it's not necessarily a showstopper because the owner wants to stay involved in the business.
Well, here's one idea. If there's any way to pay off that debt before the closing of that 60%, like if he can get a loan against something else, loan his house, loan his other real estate, loan something to just get a bunch of cash to pay off as much of that 2.3 million, Keith. Because the way I'm seeing, based upon your fact pattern, that fact pattern that we've laid out here in this hypothetical situation, and this is not tax or legal advice, these are just ideas to explore with his personal CPA, right? Is the fact that every single dollar that he can pay off of that 2.3 before close of escrow, before the funds move, right? So he has the 100% ownership, he's selling the 60% ownership. Mortgage that house, if it's, within the financial means of everything else, figure out ways to get money somewhere else, but basically get that debt off of the business as much as you can. Then at the close of escrow, it won't be hit with the capital gains tax. It won't be hit with the ordinary income tax. And let's imagine he could say, I can get a $2.3 million loan against my other properties or whatever, right? And I can clear that debt before the buyer closes. And then at that point, what we could do is do the deferred sales trust, basically for all of that amount, maybe not some of the equipment. We have to see what that shakes out to be, but let's say at least for all of the goodwill, Keith. And then that's an extra, let's say 30% more that he wouldn't have had. in the trust, of which is now cash flowing. So let's do some simple math here. Let's hypothetically say that he could actually pay off all of that debt. And let's say 3.6 million minus closing costs. Let's say it's 3.5 million hits the trust. Let's say it's earning 8%. That's $280,000 a year net of fees, on generally speaking. And then you can use that 280 that it's producing off of the 3.5 to debt snowball, the money that he had to borrow on the 2.3 from somebody else. Now it's going to take some time, but it's better than paying 30% of tax on this and probably even 40 or 50% on the ordinary income of 2.3. And then a fast forward, let's say it takes on 280,000, if you were to pay all of that, 2.3 million, let's see here, divided by 280, it'd take 8 years if it was just using the cash flow from that. Now he'd still have to pay some tax on that 280 that's coming out. But let's say it takes 10 years, right, to pay it off. It's better than having to have, just get it obliterated. So if that's at all an option for him to get any kind of even debt from somewhere else to pay off the business debt, instead of just closing and then taking the proceeds to pay off the debt, that it's all over. Does that make sense, Keith?
I think it made perfect sense. It was really fast. I'm not sure if I caught all the pieces of it.
Yeah.
No, it's good. Yeah. So let me see if I can repeat any of it, and you can say no. Okay. So, and again, I know if you have other people you're trying to get to here or no.
It's fine. If people have questions, want to raise your hand, you can click on the reactions and click on raise hand, and you can lower your hand. And also, if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat. But in the meantime, just keep going, Keith. I think people are digging it.
Okay. Yeah. No. It is a fascinating deal. Okay. So basically, you're saying the concern from what you're seeing, and I know we just briefly discussed this, but the concern would be that the 2.3 million of debt that they're going to have to turn around and pay off as part of the transaction would be treated as ordinary income. And so in other words, if I'm the seller, I'm getting 3.6, but I've got to turn around and do 2.3 to pay off the debt. So you're saying the concern is that that's ordinary income, and then the other 1.3 would be capital gains.
Right.
And so you're saying, okay, start with trying to minimize the 2.3, go ahead and pay it off before closing using other means like a bank loan or something. And then that would make it where that's not ordinary income,
right,
from whatever you receive
exactly
for the sale. Okay, but then the next piece that you put in there was, okay, so then it sounds like, unless I missed it, you moved to the 3.6 and you said, okay, we've got this bank loan out there for the 2.3, but then we're going to get the 3.6
into the trust.
That goes into the deferred sales trust, and you're saying
that gets invested, earning about, let's say, 8%. That produces about $280,000 of interest income, of which then you could turn around and you'll still pay some tax on that, ordinary income tax on that, by the way.
Okay.
But that goes towards paying off the 2.3 that you leveraged, right?
Yes.
So, and then you're buying yourself more time again. This is a key, right? Kind of like the analogy of the football, right? Yeah. He's about to get sacked, right? It's going to be a Warren Sapp. He's going to bust through and he's just going to get clobbered, right? And the worst part of it is basically all of that capital is going to be gone. It's going to just vanish because it's all going to go to paying tax, even the other 1.3 member. So instead, he's buying himself time by, leveraging something else, which is not ideal, but at least it's off the business to move it from, instead of ordinary income tax, it goes back into capital gains tax, okay, because it's debt free. So we've changed the nature of it because it's the debt over basis issue that we just solved for because we paid off the debt before close of escrow. And now we defer that. We freeze the tax, if you will, freeze it, right? It's still there if he takes the principal, but it's not at ordinary income tax rates anymore, right? It's at capital gains tax rate. So we've saved him there. But on top of that, he's more than likely going to keep that amount in there if he can. Again, if he has enough time and can produce enough cash flow somewhere else. And if so, then we can keep the full 3.6 and the 5 in the trust after closing costs or so, produce the 2.8, pay off the 2.3. 10 years, he looks up, that 2.3 is paid off over there. And And then, that was assuming a zero interest rate, by the way. It's going to be more than that. It's because, he's probably going to get charged like 7 or 8%. So let's say 12 years or 13 years. It's going to be longer than that. But the point is, if he can make sense of that, right, and he can have some more time, he can look up the end of the rainbow and say, all right, I put myself in a tough position these last few years, but if I can work this out for 12, then I actually have 3.6 sitting there producing $280,000 for me per year. Is that making sense, Keith?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So happy to get on with you and him and help out and see, work through that with his CPA and the tax attorney myself. Does anyone have questions on what just happened with Keith and I? We were talking. You can unmute yourself. Jake Carpenter, Jake Miller, you can also chime in anything I missed. I see we also have let's look at maybe George. George might be new. I think George might be part of Jake's team, but Jake Miller, Jake Carpenter, any thoughts on what Keith and I just talked about?
I would say that George is quite the handsome fellow, though he's not a member of my team, not yet. I haven't met George before.
All right.
But anyway, more than welcome to unmute the mic and say hello, George, if you'd like. At the same time, I would comment. Go ahead, George.
Thank you for the compliment. Not what I was expecting. No, I'm not a member of your team. I'm a financial advisor at Geosphere Advisors in Rhode Island, and looking for ways to open up a conversation with higher net worth prospects. I'm the junior partner of the firm. We have an established business, and I'm building my own book.
Amazing, George. And by the way, the only reason I said that is because you're handsome, and Jake is one of the most interesting men in the world. And if you haven't attended before, Jake typically has like the most interesting hair in the world, and so your mustache is now the official most interesting mustache in our world, like at least the capital gains tax solutions world. Welcome, Rhode Island, huh? Okay, very cool. How long you been in the business there, George?
I've been licensed as an advisor for 3 years.
Yeah.
Excellent. And where did you attend? And Jake Miller, if you can mute yourself while you're not talking, that'd be great. Where did you grow up? Where did you attend school and all that? I'm just kind of curious.
Grew up in Rhode Island, studied philosophy at the graduate level, and worked as a humanities professor for a number of years. Never made any money. Tried to save the kids from poverty and ignorance. Poor and ignorant.
Hey, you got to fight the good fight, right? I mean, you can't blame that. That's interesting. And then I've been to Rhode Island one time. We went to the Cape one time, right? And then the other one was Rhode Island. And on Rhode Island, there's this ice cream shop that's like right here, and then there's like this fresh fish shop, and it might be on every Rhode Island coastal line. But we stayed right on the ocean there, and it was for like a week with the family. Amazing, beautiful spot. So are you pretty close to the ocean, or is everyone kind of close to the ocean because Rhode Island's so small?
I live walking distance to the Providence River, which is close to the ocean.
Excellent. Very cool. Well, George, I'm curious, what are your thoughts so far on the deferred sales trust, given what you've been able to glean or learn so far? Any comments or thoughts or questions?
I have a lot of questions that will come up over time, but I love the idea of the deferred sales trust. Just recently got the training, launched my website. And again, trying to open up the conversation with higher net worth prospects and business owners without my senior partner in the room, if possible, although we work together if we have to.
Cool. Right. Excellent.
Well, Brett, let me comment there real fast. So this is definitely one of the tools, the financial tools that will help set you apart from a lot of the competition and other people out there. In the sense that it's not often that a financial advisor brings tax advice to the table that perhaps even the client's accountants aren't that familiar with. As we all know, sometimes if somebody hasn't done something 100 times or 1,000 times or 10,000 times, they may not be as comfortable, or they may not consider themselves the expert in that subject or that item. And I'm not saying that you need 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 times or iterations or hours in this yourself, but attending this webinar and utilizing the resources that we provide will enable you to have these conversations with your clients without your senior partner if needed. A lot of it is being able to provide solutions to individuals' problems. And a lot of it actually comes from in the conversation, identifying, because people oftentimes do not communicate well, but helping them identify what their real problems are. And we've had, Brett and I and Jake Carpenter here, we've had several conversations with real estate agents, merger and acquisition attorneys, CPAs, financial advisors, and entrepreneurs alike, helping them know and understand what it is their clients' pain points really are. So for a real estate agent, sometimes the biggest obstacle in listing a luxury home property is the fact that the client doesn't want to have to pay the taxes. And so Brett effectively has several reportings showing real estate agents, specifically how they can list more properties by showing their clients how they don't have to pay the taxes today, but with a deferred sales trust, they're able to liquidate at today's price, which might be a good price, without having to have the inconveniences of it not working for a 1031 exchange, if they lived in it, all these other things of having to reinvest within, 180 days, etc. And so understanding clients' common complaints and then presenting the fact that you're willing to talk about them usually makes their ears perk up, right? And once you've got their attention, then you mention that you've got a solution to what they have, then they start making appointments. And all of that before having to know everything about the topic, if that makes sense.
George, hopefully that makes sense. And I think you're gleaning all that. So welcome.
Yes, it makes sense. Thank you.
Happy to have you, happy to support you, and love to talk with you offline as well. So we do have another question from T, and T, it'd be great to if you could unmute this, it'd be great. Are you able in a safe place to unmute and say hello? We're talking about a potential problem with your with the DST if taxes change in 2026. So T, are you not able to talk currently? Okay, great. So I'll just kind of glean what you might be referring to on this. So there are some potential changes that are happening. One of them is actually the estate tax in 2026. It's set to cut in half, meaning the exemptions are basically 24 million married, 12 million to 14 million single right now, adjusted for inflation. So have to cut in half to basically 12 to 14 million married, 7 to 8 million single. We'll see where they actually end up at. But what that means is if you're a high net worth individual who has net worth above those amounts, and it's inside of your taxable estate, anything above those amounts are subject to a 40% tax. It has nothing to do with the stepped up basis, kind of what I was referring to before, with why a lot of people think the 1031 exchange is the end all be all, because it maintains what's called a stepped up basis and or just ownership of an asset. But that's not the full picture. You have to look at your tax flow situation as it pertains to estate tax, which is anything inside your taxable estate above and beyond the exclusion amounts will be taxed at a 40% death tax rate. So in 2026, you want to be aware that it's cutting in half, which means it's lower, which means there's more people who are going to be subject to estate tax. So the Deferred Sales Trust Plus is an amazing tool to solve that. Upon this sale, need to take a sale of an asset, we can move all of the equity outside of your taxable estate. So let's imagine it was a $100 million estate of Apple stock, cryptocurrency, a business venture, okay? And it was all inside of the taxable estate. And this was a single individual. As of 2026, let's just use the 6 million number to be as a number. If they were to sell, they're looking at a $94 million, or not sell before they died. They would get a stepped up basis, but that 94 million that's left over after the exemption is subject to a 40% death tax. That's astronomical, right? That's huge. Now let's imagine the second scenario. They sold that business into what's called a DST Plus, or Deferred Sales Trust 2.0. We could move all 100 million outside of the taxable estate, and then they died. Guess what? We've eliminated the 40% death tax because it's outside of the taxable estate. So that's the first thing, T, I'll bring up to you, that the Deferred Sales Trust becomes more attractive as it pertains to the 2026 changes. Now, what your particular question was about pertains to actually being capital gains tax being taxed at ordinary rates. Capital gains tax could be taxed at ordinary rates. So I'm curious if you're referring to capital gains tax just going away and just all considered ordinary income tax, or if you're referring to the just going higher. Either one, we have a solution for. Let's say the first one, right? It's ordinary income. In other words, it's almost like they're all considered short term. The Deferred Sales Trust can work for short-term or long-term gains. It's not just long-term gains, which is really nice because a 1031 exchange only works for long-term gains, which is a year or more. The Deferred Sales Trust can work with both. Now, each individual circumstance is a little bit different. I don't want to say it's a blanket statement, but just give you a scenario. We helped a seller sell a couple assets in Texas last year for $30+ million. Now he didn't purchase them. He purchased them, but only for a short term, less than a year. And he was able to use the deferred sales trust to defer the short-term gains and or what would be considered ordinary income tax. And so that is that we can do that. We've done it. Okay. And now let's imagine it just goes to higher rates. Well, if it goes to higher rates, then it's still just more attractive, right? Because we're deferring, instead of on average 25 to 50%, we're probably going to be whatever, if it's like 10%, right? So it just becomes more attractive because guess what? Taxes go up. So the more you can defer, the more the deferred sales trust makes more sense. T, let me know how I did. Did that answer the question? You also added an irrevocable trust. Yes, the deferred sales trust is an irrevocable trust. Yes, if that's what the question is. Brett,
what T is referring to, I texted you a snapshot of an article that I believe he's referencing.
Okay, cool.
I'll read a little bit from it. It says, property such as your home held in an irrevocable trust that is not included in the taxable estate at death will no longer receive a step up in basis.
Oh, okay. So in this scenario, let me read that again. Property such as your home held in an irrevocable trust that is not included in the taxable estate at death will no longer receive a stepped up basis. That's interesting. So so a couple of things with the deferred sales trust plus, it is an irrevocable trust. It doesn't necessarily, it's not really property. I mean, it's in the scenario, you need a stepped up basis if you own the property, or you own the real estate, or you own, a primary home, you own the business. That's the difference with the deferred sales trust plus. You don't own the trust. The trust owes you the money. And so this probably becomes more beneficial for the deferred sales trust, because someone's going to say, well, instead of just owning it in my living trust or some kind of that's typically revocable, in some kind of irrevocable trust that I still have the ownership in our family, this is going to eliminate the stepped up basis. This is another reason why I use the deferred trust. Okay, so this is actually a benefit. It gets better. Does that make sense, Jake Carpenter? Did I answer that correctly, you think?
Well said.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Okay, we're basically out of time. Jake Miller, you want to add any last comments from you, and then remind people where they can find you. And if you people want to find me, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. It's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. But I'll let Jake have a word, and then Jake Carpenter, and then we'll be back next week. So Jake Miller, last word.
Absolutely. So I think, a lot of these questions help us all understand the importance of having a team of experts to help establish the correct strategy. Whereas the deferred sales trust, just like any other big strategy out there, doesn't necessarily solve every piece of the puzzle, but it could be the keystone piece in the archway where all the other bricks fall in line, held together because of the keystone strategy or financial tool, which oftentimes can be the deferred sales trust that allows everything else to have its proper place. Now, as far as finding out more information, typically it happens by having a one-on-one consultation with a member of the team, somebody here on this call. You can reach out and find us on the website, which is strategictaxsolutions.com, or the 800 number, 1-800-773-1838. Thanks again, Brett.
Thank you so much, Jake Miller. Carpenter, if people want to find you, where they can find you?
You can call me at 509-396-5292 or carpentercapital.llc.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, for watching the replay. Please share this with someone that can be life-changing for it, to make a huge impact for their exit on capital gains tax, estate tax challenges. Go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com if you want to also learn more. We are so honored to be able to provide this content for you, with you, and we'd love for you to join us. You can also join us, sign up for the mastermind. capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. With that being said, we appreciate everyone. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you again.